Good morning, and welcome to the Africa Weekly Talk. Today's subject on the docket is about all these social media video posts by some African Americans and Blacks in the diaspora talking about their experiences and encounters when they go to Africa to visit or decide to move and live in Africa. But today's subject has to do with this particular video by an African-American woman, which has gone pretty much viral, where she talked about her experience whilst living in Ghana, which also led to a response from a Caribbean woman about this Black American's woman's experiences that she was talking about. But fellas, let's go ahead and hear what this Black American woman has to say with regards to her experience whilst living in Ghana. And I'll come back and dissect this whole thing. So let's go ahead and hear what she has to say. All right, let's go ahead and hear what she has to say with regards to her experience when she was living in Ghana. All right, let's go ahead and hear what she has to say about her experience while she was living in Ghana. There you go.
Are Americans coming over here being nasty, doing nasty things, and being bad to the locals. Now, let me flip the fucking script, okay? Let's talk about the fact that we get abused over here, too. The thing about Ghana is stop crying victim. Stop crying victim, because y'all cheat us out of a lot of stuff. Y'all invited us to come home, which by the thousands we did. We came running to Ghana. People sold their homes, moved out of their apartments, sold everything. Some people packed up containers and moved over here just to get over here and realize this is not our home. Y'all call us foreigners. Ghanaians call us that. We didn't make that word up. We didn't start calling ourselves that. We don't know that that's what y'all call the white people and the Chinese because we're not around them. But we know that that's what y'all call us. I ain't never heard the word before, Tabi, till I came to Ghana. Okay. Y'all invite us home. Let's talk about what y'all do to us. Starting from the fucking before we get to the airport, we got to have a visa that we pay for to even enter our home. We pay all this money for passports and visas to get here. We get to the airport, and as soon as you see a fucking blue passport, everybody's coming for us. Can you give me something small, small at the COVID place? You get to immigration. Can you give me something small, small? You get to baggage. Can you give me something small, small? A person grabbed a damn cart and put my bag on it and got mad because I gave him $5 because I only had hundreds because you come over here with hundreds to get the best, cash in rate. How about he looked at that and said, I don't want that. I said, what you mean you don't want it? He said, I said, I want to know, what did you expect me to give you? He said, $10. I said, so you want me to give you over 100 CDs for picking up a bag, putting it in a cart? He don't know this is like my 5th time coming through the airport. I have never seen nowhere in any country or state where people have openly, it says $60 for foreigners, $30 for locals, okay? You go to Cocoon Park, and I don't remember the price. Let's say $200 for foreigners, because that's what y'all call us, $40 for locals. You go to the castle, it's $60 for foreigners, $10 for locals. Yeah, I ain't never seen that nowhere. I never went nowhere in the US, Mexico, and Canada where it said you pay, if you a local, if you're from here, you pay $3 for a Coca-Cola, but if you're a foreigner, you pay $8 for a Coca-Cola. I ain't never seen that nowhere except Ghana. Nobody in the airport has ever asked me for no money for nothing. I have only seen that in Ghana. Now let's talk about the fact that y'all welcomed us home and how this process looks to me. According to y'all, the one.
All right, fellows. So now basically this is, all right, fellows. So now basically this is what she talked about in her video post. And she was going to go ahead and talk about her analogy of how they decided to move to Ghana, which goes back to 2019, when the Ghanaian government decided to advertise the 1619 project, which in 2019 was like the 400 years of slavery in America. So out of that advertisement by the Ghana government, a lot of African Americans and Blacks from the diaspora, people from the Caribbean and all over, decided to go to Ghana and visit Ghana. So that's what she's talking about. And that's the analogy that she's going to give with regards to having been stolen and sold or whatever to Americans. And now they decide to go back home and they have to go through these experiences. And it is out of this woman's video that also led to a Caribbean woman responding very harshly to what she had to say with regards to her experience in Ghana. So let's go ahead and hear what this Caribbean sister also had to say with regards to this experience that this African-American woman is talking about. And I'll come back and dissect this whole thing. So let's go ahead and hear what this Caribbean woman also said with regards to this whole thing.
Have you guys seen the video of the African-American woman who moved to Ghana and is complaining that she's being treated like a foreigner? I get that there are certain expectations because the Ghanaian government said, oh, everybody come home, all Black people come home. But I have to assume that this is a person who has not spent significant time in another country to recognize that the government may officially say, okay, all Black people come home, but that does not mean that that is the voice of the local people that you're going to have to live with. The other thing she complained about was, oh, the government invited us and then we had to pay all these monies to move into the country and all this money was required. Yes, dear, that's what moving abroad involves. There's also a series of videos where Ghanaians are complaining about the Black Americans who have taken up the government's call, who have moved there and are in effect gentrifying the place. And I think African Americans are not open to the idea that they can also be gentrifiers. African Americans who are moving into Black majority countries in Africa, in the Caribbean, South America, wherever, they're moving to the global South. Listen to the stories of people in these countries. I think there are some African Americans who are moving into these countries in the global South as colonizers. They may not see themselves as colonizers, but they are moving like settlers. Their actions and the entitlement that they are moving with are giving colonizer vibes. By that I mean displacing the local people, disrespecting the local culture, doing all the things to uproot the natives that a colonizer would do, to make life difficult, to make life more expensive, to make the native people uncomfortable in their own environment. I'm not saying this is solely an African-American issue, but I'm saying that in the same way that we can recognize when white people are moving into spaces and gentrifying it, when white people are moving into global South countries as settlers and colonizers, we also need to recognize that behavior in ourselves. Because
all right, fellas. So you heard this Caribbean woman also responding to the African-American woman talking about her experiences in Ghana. Now let's cut straight to the chase and dive straight into this whole issue of African-Americans and Black people from the diaspora going to Africa and so on. Black Americans and Blacks from the Caribbean have been moving to Africa for quite some time now. It goes back all the way to the 60s when some African Americans decided to move to Africa, when African countries started getting independence and so on. As a matter of fact, Rita Marley, Bob Marley's wife, late Bob Marley's wife, Rita Marley, has been living in Ghana for over, I think, 30 years now. Because I remember she moved to Ghana in the early 90s. So I know for a fact that she's been living in Ghana for quite some time now. And she's been enjoying it, and she hasn't had any complaints with the citizens of Ghana or the government of Ghana. But I also understand where this Black American woman is coming from. Taking into consideration that when the Ghanaian government advertised this 2019 year of return to mark the 400 years of slavery to African Americans and the Caribbeans and the Blacks in the diaspora to come home, invest, and be part of the new African economy. There was a lot of high expectations from a lot of these African Americans, which in some cases, I would say, out of naivety. Either some of them were very naive, they didn't understand the culture, but also didn't decide to ingrain themselves into the African culture. So they had all these advertisements with Ghanaian government telling them to come home, move to Africa and invest, and then you'll be happily accepted in on that continent and so on and so forth. Also enabled a lot of African Americans and people from the diaspora to see Africa as their future home after experiencing a lot of discrimination in America and so on and so forth. But there were some also other issues that sometimes some of these people didn't understand and didn't take into consideration when they decided to move to Africa. The issue of culture. Because she's talking about the issue of visa, where they have to apply for visas and they have to go what she goes through at the airport and all of that stuff. As an African who have lived in America for quite some time now, if I go back home to any African country, I basically go through the same thing that she's talking about. What this African-American woman is talking about is not unique only to African-Americans. As a matter of fact, even when you look at the whole world, taking into consideration even China, India, Latin American countries, and you go and visit any of those countries, the children of Latin Americans, Chinese, or Indians who are American citizens or European citizens, even when they go and visit their ancestral homes, these homes that their parents came from, they also go through the same thing that she's talking about. So this issue that she is raising is not unique only to the Africans or African countries. This happens all over the world. In Latin America, in the Caribbean, in India, in China, and so on and so forth. But unfortunately for her, she did not ingrain herself into the Ghanaian culture. So she saw this as a way of Ghanaians trying to extort African Americans or to peg the African Americans and maltreat them in this manner, which I beg to differ on that. Because like I said earlier, as an African, having visited a lot of African countries, as a matter of fact, I was in about 4 countries last year. And every African airport that I went through last year, I had to go through basically the same thing that she said. You go down there and you have these immigration officers, security guards, and so on, all of them asking you for money and this and so on and so forth. By the end of the day, you don't have to give anybody anything if you don't want to, which I don't. I don't give anybody anything. As a matter of fact, I was in Nigeria, Murtala Mohammed Airport last year, where there's a big sign that says no extortion. So I saw this dude, a security guard, who was trying to, talk me into stuff. And then I reminded him of that sign there. That's when he backed off and said, oh, no, I'm not trying to extort. I said, I know, but I just want you to know also that there's a sign here that says that no extortion. So we left it alone. So at the end of the day, you're going to go through that. You're going to have these immigration officers, security guards, and all these guys working at the airport who will try to get something out of you. But you have to be bold enough to stand up against that and tell them, no, I'm sorry, I can't do it. And that's all you have to do. You don't have to get into no argument with them. Because I have experienced it. Like I said, I experienced this thing in 4 African countries last year. Every place that I arrived at, they were talking about, oh, can I get something small? Can I get this? Can I get that? Can I get something for water? And all that stuff. So this is the experience that you definitely going to go through as a foreigner. So it's not just being targeted at African Americans. And that's where the problem is. She's assuming that she's being targeted or African Americans are being targeted just because they're African Americans. No, I'm sorry. This is done to every foreigner. Everybody they deem as foreigner, especially blacks. They hardly do this to the whites. And that's the unfortunate truth. They hardly do this to the whites because for some reason, they think maybe the whites might report them to their bosses or whatever. I don't know. But they hardly do this to the whites. They target mainly the Africans. So even as an African born in Africa and moved out to live in another country with another country's passport now, if you are going back to your native African country, you still have to go through this visa process. You still have to pay for visa fees if you're using another country's passport. So this visa thing that she was talking about is normal. That is the processes that every foreigner goes through, regardless whether you were born in Africa or whether you were born in America. As far as you are using a foreign passport, you're going to deal with this situation. You know, so I understand what she's talking about. I mean, there are a lot of hype during the 2019 year of return. There was a lot of hype. And that out of that hype also garnered a lot of African Americans who wanted to go to the motherland, to visit the motherland. So the expectations was very high. I myself, I remember around 2000, 2002, how much my own expectations for the development of Africa, politically, democratically, economically, was moving in the right direction around 2000 and 2002, 2003, 2004. I also had high expectations. By the end of the day, with my own experiences down there, whilst I was visiting, I also came to realize that maybe I have to back off. I have to pump the brakes of my expectations of the continent. And up to this day, I've come to really believe the reality of where Africa is heading with regards to the political system, the economic systems, and so on and so forth going on right now. So I get it, because I also remember around 2019, 2020, there was this advertisement by some groups, especially chieftaincy groups in Ghana, advertising of giving freelance to African Americans and blacks from the Caribbeans who have decided to move to Ghana. And only thing they have to do is to pay for the processing fees, surveying fees, and all those documentation fees, and so on and so forth. See, I don't know how many African Americans got involved in that. You know, but I looked at some of these fees, and I look at it, I'm like, hold on, fellas. I mean, these people are paying fees that basically they could have gone to buy their own land, even cheaper than that. So there was a lot of scam. I mean, there were a lot of scheme by some of these chiefs in Ghana that they used the 2019 year of return to scheme some of these African Americans. So I can understand the frustration she's talking about. I get it. By the end of the day also, if you move into any country, whether in Africa, Europe, Asia, or in America, you have to ingrain yourself in the culture of that country. You have to assimilate into that system for you to understand how the system works. Because when we move from Africa or other countries to the United States of America, we also tend to be naive about a lot of things about America. But as time goes by, we also assimilate or ingrain ourselves in American culture to understand how the system works. So if you move in as an African American or a black person from the diaspora to any African country, that is one of the key homeworks that you have to do, because we have big cultural differences. The legal system, the political system, and the economic system are totally different. You're coming from a first world country where the rule of law works, where doing things is totally different from a third world country in Africa. So your experiences down there is going to be very different from what you are used to going through in America. That is a fact. But if you go into Africa without thinking that somehow you're going to have the same experiences like you've been having in America or Europe, I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. And that is a naivety that most of these people have when they move to African countries. They have this belief. I don't know why they have that, but for some reason, they have this thinking and belief that somehow they can get things done the same way that they've been doing things in the United States of America. I'm sorry. These are totally two different cultures. And you have to understand that. You have to understand these cultures. Africa is basically an open field for everybody. Rule of law doesn't work in most African countries, all of them. I mean, it's not just most, all of them. It doesn't work. And the cultures in those societies are ingrained in the people to the extent that whether it's a boy or girl, a woman or a man, that's the same thing that you're going to go through with any of them. So when you go to these African countries and you go to the marketplace, like she's saying, they jack up prices and so on and so forth. Look, like I said, even natives who don't go to the marketplaces all the time, when they go there once in a while, they get scammed by these market women. They jack prices on goods and services for them. I mean, look, these are things that you have to ingrain yourself in the culture, in the society for you to understand. I've seen white Europeans have been coming to Africa forever. I've seen a lot of them at the marketplaces where they'll be bargaining with these market women on the goods that they are buying down there. Because they have been in that system for quite some time. So they understand the system. And they understand how to deal with the local, the natives when it comes to buying things and so on and so forth. But if you are an African American or a foreigner, and you don't ingrain yourself in that culture, then you're going to have issues. You're going to have issues, definitely going to have issues. Because it's not going to be the same like somebody who is part of that culture. I mean, even as an African black man, moving an African black man going back to visit, you are treated just like an African American because they see you also as a foreigner. They also see you as a foreigner. That is how they see us. So it's not just because you're an African American or African Americans are being targeted by these local folks. No, this is part of the culture. I remember seeing one video where this dude was talking about his visit to Egypt, where these vendors were harassing him, pretty much harassing him, you know, and he was talking about how they were coming after him, you know, everybody was trying to get him to buy stuff, and they were jacking up prices and so on. And I said, look, fellas, this is part of the African culture. Whether you go to the east, the west, the south, or the north of Africa, this is part of the culture. You are definitely going to experience this kind of behavior from the citizens of these various African countries. This is part of the culture. This is not about picking on African Americans or picking on Black people coming from the diaspora. It's all about if they see somebody that sounds or looks foreign to them, they're going to jack the prices on you. And it's not just unique to Africa. I mean, if you go to India, you go to China, you go to Latin America, it happens down there too. You go to the Caribbean, it happens down there. So basically, this is part of human nature. When people see you to be to look like a foreigner to them, they think they can take advantage of you. And it works in some cases, I would say in most cases. So they have become accustomed to dealing with foreigners like that, you know. But when the Caribbean woman also responded and talked about African Americans going to Africa to colonize Africa and talk about the gentrification process going on and so on and so forth, that is what really took me aback about this whole issue. Because African Americans are not going to Africa to colonize Africa. Nobody can colonize Africa in this modern era. Period. The days of colonization on the African continent is gone. I know some people making these claims that China going to Africa, all that is BS. All that is BS, fellas. Look, now Africans know what they are doing. It is the African citizens who are allowing these people to come there. So it's not about them enforcing certain things on the African citizens to colonize them. No. So I disagree on that. But the issue of gentrification, I get what she's trying to get to. Because she is relating this gentrification to the American gentrification that is going on, which is totally different. At the end of the day, most African countries have these two-tier economies. And these two-tier economies relate to expatriates as well as the locals, the natives of these countries. And it's pretty much basically in every African country. And it's not just even in Africa. I mean, you can find that also in most Latin American countries, Asia, India, and so on. So this gentrification issue is basically the two-tier economic systems that have been established in these countries. And this has to do with foreign expatriates who are moving to these countries and investing in these countries, and thereby ending up living in certain enclaves in these countries where standard of living is very, very high comparably to where they are coming from. Whereas the locals also live in the second tier of that economy. A key example is like Senegal, the capital city of Senegal, Dakar. Dakar is the most expensive city in Africa. And it has become the most expensive city of Africa because of the expatriates, the French expatriates living in Dakar. But one good example is Angola, Luanda. Luanda is the most expensive city in Africa when it talks about expatriates. Luanda, the capital, the city of Luanda has an enclave where it has most of these expatriates coming from Portugal, Brazil, and other countries who came there to invest in the oil boom era of Angola. And out of that, you have this enclave in Luanda, which is very, very expensive. As a matter of fact, it's considered one of the most expensive cities in the world, not just even in Africa, when you talk about the expatriates living in Luanda. And outside of that enclave of Luanda, that's where you see the real poverty of the people of Angola. It's a shame. It's a shame. And this is the two-tier economic systems that most African countries have now. Because when you look at these expatriate enclaves in most African countries, these expatriates live in these areas with a very higher standard of living. So goods and services are very expensive down there. And out of that also, it affects the local natives of these countries in terms of their economic well-being. Because it translates from higher goods and services in these enclaves, which goes on to also increase the goods and services outside of these posh enclaves that are being occupied by these expatriates. So when she's talking about gentrification, that is what I think she was talking about. But that has nothing to do with African Americans going to Africa. I mean, how many African Americans have even moved to Africa to have an impact in terms of gentrification now? It has more to do with the expatriates. And this has been going on in Africa for at least about 40, 50 years now. You find it in every African country where you see these two-tier economical systems, where you have these expatriates. I mean, people coming from the diaspora who have lived in America, Europe, Japan, higher standard of living, going down there with their money so they can afford to live in these posh enclaves that have been established by these expatriates. And out of that also makes life very difficult for the local citizens. And this has to do mainly with the African governments themselves, because they have created this problem. Because at the end of the day, you go to some of these enclaves I'm talking about, they don't even want to take their local currency when you're transacting or doing any business down there. Some of them, you want to rent in dollars. That's what they do down there. And this has to do with the local government. This has to do with the government of these African countries. This has nothing to do with African Americans or even the expatriates, because it's the government that have allowed this two-tier economic system out of corruption and bad governance. That is what have created these two-tier economic systems in most African countries. And it's not just only in Africa, like I said, you have it also in some Latin American countries, you have it in India and China and so on and so forth, you know. But it is unfortunate for her to go through these experiences and somehow tag all of them as if it's a target by Ghanaians against African Americans, which I want you guys to understand. This has nothing to do with Ghanaians targeting African Americans. This has more to do with the cultural differences that she went through. Like I stated earlier also, even for Africans who were born in these African countries, who have lived outside all their life, when they go back to visit, they also have to go through the same thing that she's talking about. Whether you are buying land, whether you want to register a business, whether you want to invest, whatever you do in most African countries, if not all of them, you have to pay either bribes or you have to know somebody who you have to pay bribe to walk you through the system. That is the way of life down there, fellas. I'm sorry. This is the fact of life in most of these African countries. You are not going to move from America to go to Africa and expect to have that same standard of doing things in America, where you can just walk to MV to renew your driver's license, of mailing a passport application, and so on and so forth. No, it's not going to happen. Down there, you go down there to go through these processes. You have to find somebody. You have to pay somebody. In most cases, bribes for them to do stuff for you. So sometimes, I mean, I understand. I get it. I get what she's talking about, because it's very, very frustrating, especially when you have lived in a system where you have gone through things where the processes work, where the rule of law works. So you have to understand that when you go to these places, rule of law doesn't work in these places. I mean, I know a lot of people who have bought land in African countries that they have been scammed over it. A lot of them. And a lot of them have to do that. They didn't do their due diligence too. You know? I mean, it is a tough system to live in. So, I mean, I get it. A lot of this year of return advertisement, you know, a lot of African Americans thought it's going to kumbaya when they visit Africa, when they go to Africa, you know. America was going through George Floyd situation and all that stuff. So they're moving to Africa and everything is going to be kumbaya. I'm sorry. Every place has its own issues and problems. And you have to understand the cultures that you are getting yourself involved in before you decide to take that leap. Because there's a lot of frustrations that goes on down there. I did some videos, a video about a year ago, where I talked about the best way to retire or to move to Africa is to go down there not to work. That's how I think. And that's what I believe. I strongly believe in that. Because the frustration involved, that involves setting up a business, going through the licensing process, all those stuff, man, I'm telling you guys, it's not easy. Every African country you go to, you're going to have issues to deal with. I don't care which part of Africa you go to, you're going to have issues. So at the end of the day, the best thing is to understand the culture, to understand the people. And if you decide to move down there, you move there gradually. You don't just take a big leap. You pace yourself. Go there for a week or a month, stay there to understand how things work down there, ingrain yourself in the systems, how things work. And as time goes by, you decide if this is a place for me to move to or not. There are a lot of beautiful places in Africa. There are a lot of beautiful places. You know what I'm saying? But as far as you don't ingrain yourself in that culture, in that society, that's where you're going to have a problem. Because you're going to find out the hard way that things are totally different from your home countries, vis-a-vis America, Europe, or Japan, or whatever. Because these are very developed countries with the rule of law that exists in these systems. Unlike most African countries, the rule of law doesn't work. That is Africa's biggest problem, is rule of law. Lack of rule of law has also contributed to the problems that Africa faces today. You know what I'm saying? So fellas, and she talking about in terms of the issues of her going through some of these market situations and so on and so forth. I get all of that. I get all of these things that she's talking about. Like I stated earlier also, we have all gone through this. I go through this every time I visit. But I also know not to give them the chance to try to scam me, because I understand the system, I understand the culture. And out of that, I don't even see why an immigration officer, I mean, these are some of the very lucky people in most of these African countries, to have a government job. And then you get down there, they're going to be soliciting, trying to extort you. When these guys are the very few lucky ones in most of these African countries. Because you walk out of the airport, you see how many people out there who don't have jobs, who are struggling. So most of the time, even when I have something to give, I don't even give anybody working at the airport, immigration officer, customs officer, and all that stuff. I'm sorry. I'm not going to give any of those people who have had the opportunity to have good jobs. I'm sorry. But when I go outside of the airport and I see the ordinary citizens, those who are living every day, struggling to put food on the table, those are the ones I give money to. Those are the ones I give my money to. those on the street begging, the beggars and all those people. Those are the ones I encourage people to give their money to. Don't give your money to somebody who has had the opportunity to get a job as an immigration officer. I'm sorry, don't give your money to those people. And you should be able to be bold enough to tell them upfront that, you know what, I'm sorry, I'm not doing it. Because the Europeans, they don't, like I said, they don't go after the Europeans, the white Europeans, they don't. Because they also know that the Europeans don't take their BS. So out of that, they don't even try it with the Europeans. But when they see a black man or a black woman, they think, oh, we can get over with him or her. So it's about time. You guys stand up to them. You just tell them up front, because you're not there to do anything illegal. You are there to just visit or whatever you're there for. So you go through the process. It's a normal process. You go through it. So you should be able to also to equivocally tell them in their faces that I'm sorry, I'm not giving you anything. If they try to challenge you, you tell them, let me see your boss. Unfortunately, the boss is even corrupt too, because they are the same. That's the unfortunate part. By the end of the day also, when you are able to be upfront, when you stand up against them, they back off. Because at that point, they don't know who you are going to go to. So at that point, they now start to think about their jobs. So in that case, in most cases like that, they're going to be backing off. They will definitely and start backing off from you. So that is what most of you guys have to do. But I mean, like I said, it is unfortunate, but that is the system. That is how the system is. And unfortunately, this system has been embraced by the citizens. So whether you are dealing with a boy or a girl or a woman or a man, unfortunately, it's become part of the culture. It is accepted in that culture. The culture has accepted this level of corruption to the point that to them it is okay. That's how they see it. But you coming from a developed system where you don't have to go through issues like this, you understand how the rule of law works. You understand how system works. So you're looking at it from a different, you're coming from at it with a different perspective. Whereas to the locals down there, it is part of their life. It's part of their culture. So they accept that as part of doing business in these various African countries. I mean, it is sad. It is sad for people to go and visit, try to establish businesses, to invest, to help build the African economy, like most African countries have been doing, advertising for African Americans and Blacks in the diaspora to move back home, and help build the African economy, and then to go down there and go through issues like this. That becomes a deterrent from African Americans as well as Blacks living in the diaspora to even decide to go and invest in Africa. But they don't even look at it that way. So fellas, this is all I have for this Sunday. If it's Sunday, it's the Africa Weekly Talk. God bless you guys and have a great week. Thank you guys and peace and love.